As early as a week from tomorrow, President Barack Obama will issue an executive order to close the U.S. detention center at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That news still unconfirmed from the Associated Press tonight. MSNBC and NBC News reporting that the shutdown itself could take more than a year. Our third story tonight, at least two executive orders, the one on Gitmo, another on torture, reportedly expected in the first week of the Obama administration. In the wake of the current president's startling admission about what did he know and when did he know it. What neither order will do is determine the fate of the 200-plus detainees, most of whom have never been charged with a crime. Instead, the order will ask for a solution to that question. Obama speaking yesterday about, quote, creating a process that would prevent dangerous detainees from getting released even if the evidence against them is inadmissible because it was obtained by torture. The issue of torture, waterboarding in specific, also creating a problem for President Obama, many of whose supporters have called for him to investigate Bush-era torture and apply the law to those responsible. That task rendered even more politically explosive after this weekend's remarkable admission from President Bush that he was informed about torture methods before they were used and he signed off on them.
The techniques were necessary and are necessary to be used on a rare occasion to get information necessary to protect the American people. One such person who gave us information was Khalek Sheikh Mohammed. He was the mastermind of the September the 11th, 2001 attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people on our soil. And I'm in the Oval Office, and I am told that we have captured Khalek Sheikh Mohammed, and the professionals believe he has information necessary to secure the country. So I asked, what tools are available for us to find information from him? And they gave me a list of tools, and I said, are these tools deemed to be legal? And so we got legal opinions before any decision was made.
We already know Mohammed gave no such information. A former Pentagon analyst told Vanity Fair last month that Mohammed, quote, produced no actionable intelligence. He was trying to tell us how stupid we were. FBI Chief Robert Mueller said he was not aware of any attacks prevented through torture. But at least now we finally have trickle-up culpability for trickle-down torture. Now we know it was not just the CIA nor Cheney. It was George W. Bush authorizing this crime, the crime of torture. So what will the Obama administration do about this admission? Attorney General designate Eric Holder's confirmation hearings Thursday, and he has been a public opponent of torture. But speaking yesterday, Mr. Obama showed little appetite, seemingly, for providing either a public reckoning or the kind of accountability that might redeem America's reputation.
We're still evaluating how we are going to approach the whole issue of interrogations, detentions, and so forth. And obviously we're going to be looking at past practices. I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards. And part of my job is to make sure that, for example, at the CIA, you've got extraordinarily talented people who are working very hard to keep Americans safe. I don't want them to suddenly feel like they've got to spend all their time looking over their shoulders and lawyering.
So no 9/11 commission with independent subpoena power?
You know, we have not made final decisions, but my instinct is for us to focus on how do we make sure that moving forward we are doing the right thing.
A pleasure, as always, to be joined by Jonathan Turley, scholar of constitutional law at George Washington University. John, thanks for your time tonight.
Hi, Keith.
Maybe Obama does not want to inflame the Holder hearings later in this week, but is not this cry for looking forward rather than backwards a little too Bushian for what may be needed in these circumstances?
Well, I'd certainly like to try that next time I bring a criminal defendant into court. Have him tell the court, you know, Judge, I committed a crime, but let's not look in the past. Let's look forward. We'd be laughed out of court. And the problem for Eric Holder is simple deductive reasoning. If waterboarding is torture, and Barack Obama has said that it is torture, and torture is a war crime, then the president has committed a war crime if he did order waterboarding. Now, you have to do some heavy lifting to avoid the simplicity of that logic.
How much clearer is Mr. Bush's guilt in this? And obviously not legally, because that interview, certainly on Fox, was not under oath. But, I mean, did he just clarify, if you will, the chain of guilt in this whole process?
Well, that's what's so difficult for Barack Obama, is that not only is this a presumptive war crime, but you have the actors coming forward and speaking quite candidly about it. You know, when we were looking at Augusto Pinochet, he wasn't going on interviews and laying out how he ordered certain devices devices. And while we didn't have a torture program that was anywhere near the Pinochet program, war crimes don't really differ depending if you did it 3 times, 4 times, or 400. You're not allowed to do them at all.
Some of the specifics contained in what we heard here and in Obama's response to it about the CIA agents and where the legal line is. Don't you want them worried about it, or at least don't you want them clear about where that line is? And if you're worried about upholding agency morale and honor, don't you have to in some way reward the agents who objected to the torture, if only by prosecuting those who didn't object?
Well, I thought that was a particularly curious statement. You know, when we're talking about talented people at the CIA, in this context, we're talking about talented torturers. Now, I'm not that sympathetic with the people who committed torture. You know, I don't view them as good people doing a nasty job. Torture was well known to be a war crime, and these people decided to do it while others objected. Now, I don't think they're going to be prosecuted. There is an estoppel defense that they can cite, that they were told that what they did was lawful. I can't believe they believed that personally, but the real question really revolves around the people that ordered the torture program. We now have President Bush speaking quite candidly that he was in the loop. We had Dick Cheney, who almost bragged about it. The question for Barack Obama is whether he wants to own part of this by looking the other way and saying that a war crime of a prior president is some type of idiosyncratic moment and we really need to move beyond it. Well, we have a bunch of treaties that say you're not supposed to move beyond it. If no one is above the law, you can't say that unless you enforce the law. Otherwise, it's just so much verbiage.
And does it not add a dimension, the estoppel that you referenced in there? Do we not have an extra dimension to this now because it is now George Bush who is saying we were told it was legal, that this almost prophylactic attempt to get a legal ruling that said, oh no, it may be torture, but we're redefining it as non-torture legally. They've already followed that same defense that the actual torturers will use. How do you beat that system if there's not going to be a prosecution?
Well, there's been a real push in the last few weeks for people to claim this estoppel defense, that as long as lawyers said you could do it, it is therefore legal even if it isn't. And the problem with the estoppel defense, it only works if you can reasonably rely on the advice, and it generally does not protect people like Bush. Otherwise, you have this Nuremberg defense, that I was just following orders. And for George Bush, it means you really can't go out and get radical or extreme lawyers like John Yoo and Viet Dinh and get them to enable you to do things that you know is a war crime. Otherwise, these treaties mean nothing.
Last point, John, when Mr. Obama takes the oath of office next Tuesday, is there anything that compels him to follow up this case, to urge his Attorney General to follow up this case?
Well, you know, when he puts his hand on that Bible and says he's going to uphold our laws, he can't do that by having one of his first acts be to ignore them. And there's no real question that crimes were committed here by his predecessor. And he can either begin his administration as a man of principle and allow the law to take us wherever it may lead, or he will inherit the same type of moral relativism that really corrupted the previous administration. I'm going to say a silent prayer for principle, and I hope that it takes hold.
Jonathan Turley of George Washington University. Great thanks as always, John, and well said.
Thanks, Keith.